So now that we know what it takes to be diagnosed with a disorder, let's start talking about some specific disorders. Now, the first category of disorders are the anxiety disorders. And sort of the stereotyped example of an anxiety disorder would be generalized anxiety disorder. Now, on these disorders, I tried to break it down by the cognitive and the physical symptoms that go along with each disorder, try and give you sort of an orderly presentation. So the cognitive symptoms that go along with generalized anxiety disorder is that you find yourself worrying a lot, and you experience what's called free-floating anxiety. What that means is that there's nothing specific making you feel anxious. It's absolutely not about having a job interview that you're nervous about. It's not anything you could put your finger on that's causing you to feel anxious. It's just sort of you are anxious. It's not attached to an object like a phobia would be. That's a different kind of disorder. That's a different kind of anxiety disorder. We're talking specifically here about a person who has just sort of, they have got the symptom of being the sort of person who worries a lot. And then they also have like this free-floating, just sort of higher level of anxiety all the time. Now, some of the symptoms that are physical that can go along with generalized anxiety disorder would be looking like you're scared. I mean, right? You've got trembling, sweating, fidgeting, agitation, difficulty sleeping, things like that. And so you have a person who physically is having a response that any of us would be able to accurately label as fear. Now, for some people who have generalized anxiety disorder, it will culminate in what's called a panic attack. Other people who have panic disorder don't have the generalized worrying, but periodically just have these panic attacks. So it's not necessarily the case that a person who has panic disorder has also been diagnosed with anxiety disorder. And it's not always the case that a person who has generalized anxiety will have a panic attack, but they do tend to go hand in hand. So what's a panic attack? Well, there are cognitive symptoms where you have, in the attack, you have this just intense dread or terror. You feel like you've got to get out of here. You feel like that this situation is making you feel like you're smothering, or that you can't breathe, or that it's what's making you feel scared. This intense dread or terror, oftentimes sufferers will describe it as just like this overwhelming fear that they're about to die. The physical symptoms oftentimes mimic things that can kill you, like a heart attack. A lot of times people who have had panic disorder, a panic attack, will say that they thought they were having a heart attack. And so they have chest pains. They may feel like they can't swallow. They might feel like they can't breathe. They may have numbness, a lot of times in their extremities. Sometimes their lips will feel numb, things like that. Now, the thing about panic disorder is that it feels very real. It feels like this time it probably is going to kill me. This time for sure I'm having a heart attack. And so when you go to the doctor, it's really important, if you ever feel chest pains, it's really important to go to the doctor and say, I feel chest pains, and get the workup for the physical side first, before you ever say, I'm also, feeling panicky or something like that. Particularly if you're female. If you're female, the assumption is it's more likely panic attack than heart attack, when in fact women are just as likely as men to have heart attacks, especially over the age of 50. So it's really important for anybody, male or female, if you feel these symptoms that are physical, to go to the doctor and make sure that they really aren't physical symptoms. Just because in the past you've had a panic attack doesn't mean that in the future you can't have a heart attack. So sometimes people who have been diagnosed with panic disorder will think every time they have chest pain, it's probably psychological, and in fact it can sometimes be physical, right? So it's important to get it checked and not to start discounting yourself and saying, well, I must be a hypochondriac or something. Panic attack feels very real, and needs to be treated as possibly you are having physical symptoms. But then once it's been discerned that this is probably psychological and not physical, there are ways that you can kind of calm yourself down and work your way through it without having to necessarily go to medication. And we'll talk about that in the next chapter, how to treat panic disorder using cognitive treatments. Okay, so generalized anxiety disorder may culminate in a panic attack, or panic attacks may come out of nowhere. One of the things that's really scary for people with panic disorder is that they do sometimes pop out when you are at your most calm, relaxed. All of a sudden you get this feeling. That's actually one of the ways that you can tell it's probably psychological and not physical, is that heart attacks are more likely to occur after some kind of exercise or exertion, whereas panic attacks can come out when you're completely relaxed and everything's fine. And that's what makes it a disorder. If it happened when you're already scared and then you just get really intensely scared, that wouldn't be a disorder. That's just called, learning or, something adaptive. The fact that it comes out of nowhere when you should be feeling relaxed, a lot of times people will wake up in the midst of a panic attack. You were sleeping. There's nothing, maybe your dream triggered your sympathetic nervous system, and then you woke up to that and interpreted it as a panic attack. But more likely, it's just your unconscious brain let this anxiety bubble up. It's really common when a person has had an acute experience of recognizing mortality, and then you try and deny it and go on about your life like nothing happened, that you might internalize that awareness of mortality into a panic disorder. There's a video I like to show in my in-person classes of, what's the mom Judd's name? I think it's Naomi is the mom's name. And Naomi had been a country duo with her daughter Winona, and then Naomi got diagnosed with hepatitis C. She had been a nurse, and she had gotten a needle stick and contracted hepatitis C. And so the doctors told her she needed to stop touring, that her liver was going to fail, and that she only had a short amount of time to live. Well, that was 25 years ago, so obviously, she did not have a short amount of time to live because she's still alive. But she went through this big farewell tour with her daughter and said goodbye to all their fans. And then she went home to their family home in Tennessee, and Winona went back out on the road. Her younger daughter, Ashley, was an actress and had a weekly series at the time and was in Hollywood shooting that. And then her husband was a tour promoter and was out with the band that he promoted. She's home alone on her farm in Tennessee and trying to act like everything's fine. I'm not worried. I'm going to live through this. This is no big deal. I'm fine. I'm trying to keep everybody else calm. And then she suddenly started to have panic attacks. And being alone is one of the precipitating factors for panic attack. And it may not be that you are physically alone, but feeling alone is adequate to meet this criteria. Feeling like other people don't understand or that you can't talk about it can meet the criteria. So feeling alone, having a dramatic change in your lifestyle, so moving, getting a new job, quitting your job and being out on your ranch in Tennessee, these kinds of things are the major life changes that can often precipitate a panic attack. And then finally, recognizing your own mortality. So in her case, she got diagnosed with something that was supposed to be fatal. For some people, it's having survived an accident. For some people, it's having survived some kind of infection or some kind of life-threatening thing happened, and they survived it. But now they're aware, I could die. I could die, right? So I'm alone. I don't have my stable routine to support me, and I'm aware that I could die. And then a lot of times people will respond with these kind of panic reactions where they start to have these symptoms where they're like, oh my God, I am dying, and there's no one here to help me, and I'm scared. So those are the precipitating factors. Usually most people will have all three when they have panic attacks. And so it's a very real phenomenon. There are treatments that like I said, that you can employ that will help to make a panic attack less likely, or to help calm yourself down once you're having one. So we'll talk about that in the next chapter. Okay, let's go ahead and take a break here because we got to talk a little bit about phobias, and I don't want to go too long. So let's come back and talk about phobia in the next segment.